But first, let's bring in my panel. Liberal MP Tony Pasin, Sky News contributor Jamie Rogers. I want to start with the Liberal leadership, but while I have you, Tony Pasin, I would hope between now and the election, you will have a proper fair income immigration policy that puts a number on how many people you want to come to Australia with some sense of what our overall population should be, rather than Labor's Big Australia by stealth. What's your view?
I'm with you completely, Peter, and I wouldn't give us until the next election. If we learnt nothing from the last election, we need our policies out loud and proud, nice and early. I think we need to set this position by Christmas, to be honest, so that we can sell it over the course of next year and beyond. My view is we need to set a number that reflects the capacity for Australia and Australians to build houses for these new arrivals. And I'm perfectly comfortable with a number which is much less than the long-term average, because we're living through a housing crisis. I wrote about this recently, Peter, when I made the point that traditionally migration was about serving the interests of the nation. Right now, the interests of the nation are for us to press the brakes, and arguably to press them very hard at the moment, because until housing and the critical infrastructure like schools, hospitals, roads, etc. catch up, then we're just making a rod for our own back.
Tell you what, I love what I hear, Tony Pasin. I hope you're speaking up loudly in the party room. You've got another week in Canberra. Keep it up. Let's go to the New South Wales Liberals. We saw what happened, obviously, yesterday, Jamie, in Victoria. Mark Speakman under pressure. There's talk there could be a move against him tomorrow on Thursday. But he has put out what I'd regard as a pretty unusual pitch for the leadership. Let's have a listen.
We focus so much these days on the performer and not their actual performance, especially in politics. I don't believe in showing off. I believe in showing up. I guess that means I'm a bit boring to some people, but you know what? Boring gets the job done. Delivering for the future has become a forgotten concept in politics, and Australians need that delivery more than ever.
All right. I'm not so convinced. What do you think?
I'm not sure you should be standing up there, Peter, and declaring that you're boring, especially when he's not resonating in the polls. And there was that recent Daily Telegraph article where someone was going out and asking who knew Mark Speakman, and no one did. So for someone that's trying to convince his party that he is the person to take on Chris Minns, I probably wouldn't be selling myself as boring. Chris Minns is extremely charismatic. He's not doing his job, but people like him. I think when you're in politics, and especially in a leader, boring is not something that you want to be. Now, regarding tomorrow, it's going to be very interesting to see if Alistair Henskins or Kelly Sloan ends up going and taking on for the leadership. It looks like Alistair Henskins might do it, and then Kelly Sloan can open the door for Kelly, because I spoke to her with Jamie on our podcast just recently, and I asked Kelly about this leadership opportunity, and she did make it very clear that she doesn't want to be the one to knife Mark in the back, because he's always been a huge supporter of hers, but she is very popular amongst the Liberal Party. I've had a lot of people write to me, Peter, throughout the past few weeks just to say how much they really liked Kelly Sloan every time they see her in the press, and think that she'd be a really good leader for the Liberals. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens tomorrow. And both Alistair and Kelly, I can't say they're boring, so they'll certainly make headway in that space.
Wouldn't that be interesting? And the ABC would have to sort of, grind its teeth at the terrible, terrible women's problem in the Liberal Party of 3 out of its 5 or 6 national leaders, well, 4 if you count Leah Finocchiaro, 4 are women. No quotas inside as well. Hey, talking about the ABC, all of this carry on, Tony Pasin, about the fact that, say, the New South Wales Liberals are not backing net zero, nor are the Nationals, or there is talk about it that they might move, whilst you federally have walked away from net zero. I mean, 2/5 of bugger all matters about whether the states have a target. It's a national target that matters, and a national target up against any sort of global number. We know globally most of the big emitters are doing diddly squat, but this obsession about what's happening on climate change at a local council level, again, even at a state level, I think is absolutely meaningless.
My message, Peter, through you to state governments right across the nation is stick to your knitting. Their knitting in this space is energy generation. And when we think about energy generation, if I can take the jurisdiction we're talking about, New South Wales, there's a lot of talk about net zero and these things, but when it really matters, when the pressure's on, when we need to make sure the lights stay on, all of a sudden, the decisions we see are decisions to extend the life of coal-fired power stations. Now, presumably that's a position with respect to airing that the New South Wales Liberal Party supports. And so I find it very difficult to reconcile these positions. I just want them to focus on what we need from them, and what we need from them right now is a practical, pragmatic approach to energy generation. The fact that we've got ourselves in this mess is a product of too many chiefs and not enough Indians, too many people wanting to stir the pot and no one wanting to take responsibility.
Yeah, and just on that, Tony Pasin, what about Atlassian? Mike Cannon-Brookes, who we know donates to the Teals via Climate 200. He has climate targets for his company. They've not met them this year. They didn't meet them last year, and they didn't meet them the year before.
Peter, if your listeners do nothing else this evening but to grab a copy of Yoni Basham's piece in The Australian today, they must read it. I've asked all members of my staff to read it today. Here we have a company owned by Mike Cannon-Brookes that wants to lecture the corporate world about what they need to do in relation to meeting net zero. And lo and behold, we find out they didn't meet their targets this year. They didn't meet them last year, and they won't meet them next year. There's a line in the piece that says not only did they miss their targets, but they lapped them twice. I mean, this is hypocrisy written large. It just reminds me of that maxim: do as I say. Do as I say,
not as I do. Not as I do. A bit like
exactly where this debate has got to.
100%. When Zali Steggall used to drive around in a great big gas-guzzling four-wheel drive, lecturing all of us. Yeah, good on that one. Let's go to the ABC, who don't mind a bit of a lecture. Their managing director, of course, at the National Press Club today, Hugh Marks. And he was asked about, and Chris Kenny's been absolutely diligent on this, about concerns regarding bias in their reporting. Have a listen.
You would be aware of concerns raised, including on Sky News, about the coverage of Donald Trump's January 6th speech, but others too raising concerns around the Line of Fire series, the gunshot audio. Do you view these as reasonable scrutiny of fair criticism, and do you think they're worthy of further inquiry?
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the time, I think the comparison of the ABC Four Corners to the BBC Panorama show was opportunistic. The same faults were not consistent on both programs. So I didn't accept that was legitimate criticism.
Yeah, I don't know that the courts would say that, Jamie, because the ABC's had plenty of payouts in relation to some of this stuff. What did you make of his response?
So I watched that address to the press club, Peter, and I found it really interesting, a lot of the words that he was using throughout his speech regarding how the ABC is so impartial and how important they are to Australians. And that's where we all go to get our information, because their journalists are top quality. And he just kept reiterating that line, impartial, we're impartial. And I just couldn't help but sit there and think, it's lucky that we've got people like Chris Kenny, who's been so good highlighting just how biased they have been in their reporting, in particular around Donald Trump and in that January 6th riot, where they have edited out some really key pieces of his speech where he was saying we're going to walk down there and cheer on members of the Senate and the congressmen and women who are doing a really good job. But they removed that and left the pieces in there where he's saying we're going to fight, but without context of the rest of the speech. Yep. It looked as though he was really inciting all that violence on January 6th. And it's worth also noting that he did say in his speech for Donald Trump that for everyone to walk peacefully to the Capitol, and all of that was removed. So I did just think it was very interesting that Mark was standing up there saying, hey, we're here, we're subject to scrutiny, we should be scrutinised, because we'll do a better job if we are. But then as soon as he's asked a question by Cam Redden, he there is just saying it was opportunistic. So I just think the whole thing just made me feel quite concerned about what's coming out of the ABC, because it was a perfect time that, hey, he's up there saying we need to own our mistakes, so go and own it and say, yeah, we made a mistake and apologise, and then we can move on.
I just reckon at the next census we give everyone the opportunity. We will pay your fee to the ABC as taxpayers. The government will pay. You just have to tick the box. If you want the ABC, you tick the box. Otherwise, we'll keep the $1 billion in our pocket. Yeah. And only those who tick it will get it for free. Everybody else will save the money. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. A dwindling audience and get even
Great
smaller.
plan.
I'll leave it there. See you both soon.